How's it going, everybody? It's me, the RuneScape historian, back with a new video. This one is going to be about RuneScape Classic, the Pking, maybe how it originated, the changes made to Pking, as well as some of the popular Pking builds. It probably won't encompass all of the Pking builds or the more niche PK builds. The ones with a lot of information out there will be on here. So, without further ado, let's hop right in. Before we hop in, I kind of want to shout out the Discord. It will be in the pinned comment below as well as the description. This video idea was actually from one of my viewers that is in the Discord. I have a channel where you can input video suggestions and see them made into a video. So yeah, let's hop in for real this time. So for starters, you had two types of accounts: non-player killers and player killers, or pkers. From my understanding, when you first created your character, you had the option to select this. You had the option to change it later as well once you got into the game, but you had to keep in mind this option could only be changed twice. So let's say you misclicked or accidentally double, triple clicked it, maybe you lagged a little bit, you could potentially be locked into a certain role. So you could potentially mistakenly be locked as a non-player killer or as a player killer. As the name suggests, non-player killers could not be attacked anywhere because at this time there was no wilderness. So they got to skill freely, but yeah, they couldn't attack players either. They couldn't be attacked and also couldn't attack. They were completely safe. Pking accounts, on the other hand, could be attacked anywhere with the exception of Lumbridge and maybe a few other minor safe areas, usually located in town. Through my research, there was some debate on the level range that could be attacked during this stage. Some say it was within 3 levels of your combat. Some say it was within 4. So just imagine 3 or 4. You could attack someone 3 or 4 levels below you or 3 or 4 levels above you. In the very early days of RuneScape Classic, there was only one login server. This means if you and your boys were chasing down somebody, let's say you bested someone in a 1 versus 1 and you're chasing them, somehow they walk diagonally and get gap on you and they log, there's only one server. If you just sat around and waited, when they log in, they have to log into that server. This led to a bunch of people just waiting around after someone logged and jumping on them the moment they came back into the game to trap them into the 3-hit combat and finish the job and kill them for their loot. You know, there was some crazy asses waiting around for 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, being like, oh, we're gonna get them. I just know it. When they log in, we're gonna jump on them and get them real good. In addition to this, the 3-hit combat rule was in full effect when it came to Pking. If you got trapped in combat with the higher level player, you would have to take at least 3 hits from them. Due to this 3-hit combat mechanic, this made a skill known as catching extremely valuable and very feared amongst PKers. Players who were extremely skilled at catching had it down to a science. They knew the exact game tick on which to click a person right when the 3-hit combat ended, that way they could catch them again, forcing them to take another 3 hits. It's also important to note you could not eat while being stuck in this 3-hit combat. You could only eat while running away. This made catching one of the most valuable skills when it came to RuneScape Classic PKers. Due to the danger of this mechanic and people who were proficient at it, it also made retreating a very valuable skill as well. Players learned that if you ran diagonally or walked, because there was no running on RuneScape Classic, you walked diagonally and used other strategies, it could throw the PKer off unless they too knew to walk diagonally and catch you. For the introduction of the wilderness, Rune 2-hand swords were used almost exclusively by F2P PKers. This was due to all weapons having the same speed. So there was no real advantage to using a Rune longsword, for example, in Pking situations. F2P players opted to use the Rune 2-hand sword for this reason. They didn't use Mage Arena staves yet because that came out with the wilderness. Knowing this fact, that meant Mage was probably underutilized when it came to Pking at this stage of the game, before the wilderness came out. Ranged was also seen as pretty underpowered overall, so it also was not used as much. This made melee the most used form of combat when it came to Pking. Another interesting point is, before the introduction of the wilderness, Edgeville was just simply named Abandoned Town. You know the big shed with a bunch of men in it that are level 2? Well, that had no floor and just had overgrown like ferns and grass all in it. There was also no bank. So very interesting. With the introduction of the wilderness, it was changed to the Edgeville that's more familiar to us with the bank and the fully layered houses and everything else. What's also an important note is that before the wilderness came out, every area was seen as multi-combat, at least according to some of my sources. What's also worth a mention is that for range and mage PKers, everywhere was considered multi-combat for them. This was even seen after the introduction of the wilderness. Let's say there was 2 melee pkers fighting in a 1v1. The major or ranger could just attack one of them and pile. From what I found, this was generally seen as dishonorable, and other pkers would jump on the ranger for you, or even sometimes people that were participating in the 1v1, even if the player was not on them and was on the person they were fighting, they would try and attack the ranger. Now I feel is a good time to jump into some of the various Pking builds that players used around this time in RuneScape Classic. One similarity between the RuneScape Classic Pking community back then and the old school RuneScape Pking community is that they have a wide variety of accounts. They do this in order to attack a wide variety of level ranges. So this was also a practice in RuneScape Classic. Let's check out some of the builds they used. First account type we're going to take a look at was known as a prayer beast. Some people debate on whether this was used to 1 item or whether it was used to 3 hit. In my opinion, from my research, granted I did not play at this time, it would be 3 to 4 years later when I would play, but it seems like it was meant to do a bit of both. It was meant to 1 item or PK with low risk, and also have a great chance of 3-hitting somebody due to the 3-hit combat mechanic. These accounts would typically be seen wearing monk robes, Amulet of Strength, some sort of offensive bonus like glove slot, and just generally having low risk while also having very high strength, and 31 prayer for the ultimate strength, as well as the protect item at 25 prayer. So they were able to PK with relatively low risk at all times, yet have great potential to 3-hit their opponent. With the way combat level scaling worked back then, they would also have low magic, usually none. They would have level 1 magic, 1 defense, and very high attack, strength, and also hit points on some of these builds. This led to them being able to hit higher and more often than other players within their level range. They would be hit a lot and have the potential to die, but at the end of the day, it did not matter because they weren't risking a whole lot. According to a few players who played back then, the most common type of Pure was just seen as someone who had 40 attack, 40 defense, and very, very high strength. This was to wear Rune and wield Rune and be able to hit super hard with that high strength level. Somewhat uncommon build was known as an Adamant Pure with 40 attack, 30 defense, and high strength. While magic was generally seen as underpowered before Mage Arena came out, there was still room for low levels to use magic. There were some low level magic PKers around 8 to 10 combat, huge battles between them, and there was also Adamant and Myth 2-hand PKers in the 20s and 30 combat range, as well as some Rune 2-hand Pures in the mid to high 30 combats. Another type of build that could be seen after the introduction of the Wilderness and later Mage Arena was the Mage Tank. They would maximize their melee defense because keep in mind your options for magic armor that gave magic offense bonus were few and far between, almost non-existent, so most players opted to use Rune armor and have the God Staff and Mage that way, maximizing defense and having a pretty good Mage level as well. This is not even close to all of the account builds, but should give you kind of an idea of what was around at the time. This is not an all-encompassing list, nor did I play around the time, so it's not going to be perfect. It's just going to be based on information that I could find. Some of you guys in the comments could probably do a better job listing and detailing the various account builds, but there's probably so many that I won't be able to encompass them all, and there will always be some niche builds and stuff that I'm going to miss. But wait just a second, there's a few more. There was also accounts known as flats. Flats would have attack, strength, and defense equal level. So imagine 70, 70, 70. I still know a few people that just train this way on old school, but that's more just due to like OCD, typically. Many of these flats accounts would rather use the Rune Chainmail body and Clank's gauntlets for the offense bonus rather than having the extra defense of the Rune plate body. Keep in mind if you had a Rune plate body, you could not wear gloves. With the Rune Chain, it opened up the option to wear gloves. Also worth a mention is Plate Pures. They were a variant of the flat account we just talked about, but they had access to the Rune plate mail body and the Dragon Axe without level 33 in magic. This was typically due to RuneScape Classic's conversion to RS2 in 2004. Players could transfer Wormbrain's part of the map into RuneScape Classic, because currently the minimum magic level to be able to complete Dragon Slayer 1 is 31, and that's utilizing the boost from a Wizard's Mind Bomb to use Telekinetic Grab. Mains were also a thing, but they generally weren't used to PK because they had a magic level. and they typically had this magic level to help them with skilling, using things such as superheat and the various teleports around the map. I'm not saying mains never PK'd, but they were generally seen as an unpopular choice for doing so. Also at the time, you had the spell Weaken, which would lower an opponent's defense by 5%. If you were caught with these runes on you, like if someone killed you and they saw the Weaken runes in your loot pile, you were the laughingstock. They thought this was a dishonest way to PK, and they make fun of you for it, which I thought was kind of hilarious, to be honest. I'd like to take the time now to go over a few other interesting little tidbits that don't necessarily fit anywhere else into the video very well, but also had their impact on the game when it came to PKing and were also interesting. So first and foremost, the Wilderness was introduced August 13th of 2001, and Lost City was introduced February 27th of 2002. What this means is, even after the Wilderness came out, your best in slot for melee PKing was still the Rune 2-hand sword. Even after the introduction of the Dragon Sword, it still only beat out the Rune 2-hand sword by 1 weapon aim and 1 power. Another interesting note is that the Glory Amulet was in the game, but it would not come out till the 27th of February of 2002, the same date as the Dragon Sword. What this meant is that PKers would use the Ruby Amulet or Amulet of Strength before this came out, and even after for players who wanted to just simply maximize damage and not care so much about accuracy. But guys, we've gone over the introduction of the Wilderness, the way PvP was before the Wilderness, some of the builds, some of the weapons used. There might be a few things I left out. As I said before, this is not an all-encompassing list, nor is it an all-encompassing list of the builds and strategies implemented by players. Just a brief overview of some of the highlights. So if someone gave you a wedgie in the middle of the Wilderness with some niche PKing build, then you can put it in the comments below. But yeah, not an exhaustive list. But anyways, guys, that's gonna about do it for me. I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you all for watching. And yeah, bye.